Good morning, learners. I'm Glarmina, Academic Counsellor, IGNOU MPC question 14000. So we are dealing with the course MPC-004 Advanced Social Psychology. So in the last session, we have finished Unit 4 of the first book, study material. So next, we can start with Unit 5 or Unit 1 of the second booklet. So it is the concept of social influence. So let's start with the definitions. So social influence, it is a change in an individual's thoughts, feelings, attitudes or behaviors that results from interaction with another individual or group. So how our thoughts, feelings, attitudes and behaviors can be genuinely changed through the interaction with another individual or group. So it refers to the change in behavior that one person causes in another, intentionally or unintentionally. So the change the person perceives himself in relation to the influencer, the other people and the society in general. It is also defined as the efforts of one or more individuals to change the attitudes, beliefs, perceptions or behaviors of one or more others. Social influence can also be defined as the process by which individuals makes real changes. That is an important point. It makes real changes to the feelings and behaviors of individuals as a result of the interaction with others who are perceived to be similar, desirable or expert. Next comes various current researches on social influence. This question was asked in the last question paper of MPC-004. So let's see what are the current researches on social influence. It was done into 5 main areas. The first one was minority influence in group settings. So how a minority can influence a majority. Like for example, how teachers can influence students, how politicians or religious leaders influence their followers, etc. So how a minority subgroups attempts to change the majority. So and it depends on the consistency of the minority group viewpoints. The presence of larger groups often leads to more creative thinking and solution by minority group. The next area is on persuasion. Persuasion can be defined as the change in attitudes or beliefs based on the information we receive from others. It focuses on written or spoken messages sent from the source to recipient. So there are two types of theories that dominate persuasion research. First one is elaboration likelihood model and the second one is heuristic systemic model. In elaboration likelihood model, we say that the amount and nature of thinking that a person does about a message, that will affect the kind of persuasion that the message produces. So how much effort we give about that message. So it matters a lot. And also it says, the research says that the source, message, the recipient, the affect, the channel and the context affects the kind of persuasion. Okay. Now comes the heuristic systemic models. It proposed that the argument strength will be most effective in persuading an individual when he is motivated and able to attend to the message. So there are basically two routes, systemic route and heuristic route. The persuasion that takes place through systemic route will be relatively permanent and enduring, and the persuasion through heuristic route is more likely to be temporary. So if we are motivated, then the route will be systemic one, and if you are not motivated, the route will be heuristic one. Then comes social impact theory. So social impact theory means any of the number of changes that might occur in an individual due to the presence or actions of others who are real, imagined or implied. So the changes can be physiological, cognitive, emotional or behavioral one. And it says that the impact of any information is a function of three major factors. First one, how many numbers are there who make up that source, the number of others who make up that source. Next one is immediacy. It means the closeness or the strength. And the third one is salience or power of that information. So next is social influence network theory. Here it says that the theory involves a two-weighted averaging of influential opinions. First, the actor will have their own initial opinion of some matter, and when he joins in a group, at each stage the actor forms a norm opinion, which is a weighted average of other opinions in the group. Then the actor modifies his own opinion in response to this norm, forming a new opinion, which is a weighted average of their initial opinion and the network norm. So according to group norms, we are changing slowly or we are modifying our initial opinions. Next comes expectation states theory. Here, according to this theory, group members develop expectations about the future task performance of all the members in the group, including themselves. So once these develop, these expectations are guiding our group interactions. So these expectations both guide and are maintained by the interaction. So those group members for whom the highest expectations are held will be the most influential in the group's interactions, or he can be the leader of that group. So these were the current researchers in social influence area. Next comes the three different areas of social influence. These are the three different areas in which we can change intentionally or unintentionally the attitude, feelings, thoughts and behaviors of another individual. So these are the three forms or three areas of social influence. First one is conformity, second one is compliance, and third one is obedience. So let's start with the compliance first. Conformity first. So conformity, it is the type of social influence in which individuals change their attitudes or behaviors in order to adhere or to stick to the existing social norms. So conformity, it is changing how you behave to be more like others. So we seek approval and friendship of others. So here we are adhering to social norms. So people often conform from a desire to achieve a sense of security within the group. Typically a group that is of a similar age, culture, religion or educational status. Okay. Can be seen among peers usually. Then conformity influences the formation and maintenance of social norms and allows the society to function smoothly and predictably. Because conformity is a group phenomenon, such factors as group size, unanimity, cohesion, status, prior commitment and public opinion all help to determine the level of conformity an individual will display. Let's see with an example. It was a classic study done by Solomon E. Ash in 1951. Actually, he gave groups of 7 or 9 college students what appears to be a test of perceptual judgment. He told it was a test for perceptual judgment, matching the line of a length of a line segment to comparison lines. So he drew a standard line and corresponding to that he drew 3 comparison lines. Each subject saw a pair of cards set up in front of the room similar to the ones that follow. In a group of 8 subjects were his confederates. And the result was that although people could pick up the correct line 99% of the time, when making the judgments by themselves, they went along with the erroneous group judgment, and 75% of time, even when it was plainly wrong. So, one of the 3 lines at the right is equal to the standard line at the left. So, the original participant should decide which line is equal to the comparison line. It was very evident, the result, the correct line was very evident, but the 8 subjects who were the real confederates of the experimenter responded incorrectly. And the confirming subjects did not fool themselves into thinking the wrong line was equal to the standard line. They could see the difference also. They were influenced. Actually, what happened was they were influenced by the 8 people in a row making the wrong decision. The confirming subjects were later asked why they had made such obviously incorrect judgments. Then the report was that the subjects told they must have been looking at line widths, or I assumed it was an optical illusion, or if 8 out of the 9 people made the same choice, I must have missed something in the instructions. So Ash obtained the conformity effect through this experiment. Now comes the various factors that found to increase conformity. The first one was attractiveness of other members in the group. The people tend to go along with a group of attractive people. Next comes complexity or difficulty of the task. The people will confirm if the judgment is difficult for them. Next is group cohesiveness. Here the people confirm more if friendships or mutual dependencies were set up beforehand. Next comes types of norms. There are basically two types of norms, descriptive norms and injunctive norms. So descriptive norms are ones indicating what most people do in a given situation. Like we can witness somebody blow out the cigarette before entering into the bus. It is called as descriptive norms, which we obey. Then injunctive norms specifically say what we ought to be done, which is approved or disapproved behavior in a given situation. For example, if it is written as smoking is prohibited in public places and we are confirming with that instruction. Next factor is group size. Group size has an important effect on the tendency to conform. That is the group size of the influencing group. But there is chances that we are likely to conform to opinion held by the group if the number of group members holding the same opinion is large. Okay. So these are the different factors that are found to increase conformity. Now comes the varieties of conformity. There are two main varieties of conformity: informational conformity and normative conformity. So are otherwise called as informational social influence and normative social influence. So let's see what is informational social influence or informational conformity. It occurs when one turns to be the member of one's group to obtain accurate information. So our desire is to be right in this situation. A person is most likely to use informational social influence in three situations. When a situation is ambiguous, people become uncertain about what to do. During a crisis, when immediate action is necessary in spite of panic, looking to other people can help ease fears, but unfortunately they are not always right. The more knowledgeable a person is, the more valuable they are as a resource. Thus, people often turn to experts for help. You can refer Muzaffar Sharif's autokinetic experiment to understand this concept. So, informational social influence can often result in internalization or private acceptance later. Then comes normative social influence. It is actually the desire to be liked by others. It occurs when one confirms to be liked or accepted by the members of the group. It can be seen among peers usually. So normative influence is a function of social impact theory which has three components. The number of people in the group has a surprising effect. As the number increases, each person has less of an impact. A group's strength is how important the group is to a person. Groups we value generally have more social influence. Immediacy is how close the group is in time and space when the influence is taking place. These are the factors that affect normative social influence: the strength, the immediacy, and the number of people. So there is one more situation when accuracy is not very important. It is better to get the wrong answer than to risk social disapproval. And there is a contradictory situation also. It is an experiment using procedures similar to ASH, and it's found that there was significantly less conformity in 6-person groups of friends as compared to 6-person groups of strangers. Because friends already know and accept each other's, there may be less normative pressure to conform in some situations. So field studies on cigarette and alcohol abuse, however, generally demonstrate evidence of friends exerting normative social influence on each other. So there are exceptions in these kind of researches. Then comes minority influence and conformity. Although conformity generally leads individuals to think and act more like groups, individuals are occasionally able to reverse this tendency and change the people around them. This is known as minority influence. So it is most likely when people are able to make a clear and consistent case for their point of view. I told you the consistency of the minority group viewpoint before. Then the minority members who are perceived as experts, are high in status, or have benefited the group in the past are almost likely to succeed. Another form of minority influence can sometimes override conformity effects and lead to unhealthy group dynamics also. So by creating negative emotional climate that interferes with healthy group functioning. Next comes how gender and conformity is connected. We know that females are more likely to conform than males. Women are more persuasible and more conforming than men in group pressure situations that involves surveillance. In situations not involving surveillance, women are less likely to conform. And females are more susceptible to social pressures than males. But in situations like if there are both sexes, men and women conform more than the participants of same sex. How people resist conformity? What are the situations? So if the desire to maintain our uniqueness or individuality is more, there is less chance to conform. And the desire to maintain control over the events in their lives is also another factor. Most people want to believe that they can determine what happens to them, and yielding to social pressure sometimes run counter to this desire. So these three desires resist conformity to a greater extent. Next comes the second area of compliance. That area of social influence, that is compliance. So compliance, it refers to the act of responding favorably to an explicit or implicit request offered by others. It is not adhering to existing social norms, but it is through explicit or implicit request we are changing our attitudes, feelings, thoughts and behaviors. And the request may be explicit, such as direct request for donations, or implicit, such as an advertisement promoting its products without directly asking for purchase. Next comes basic principles underlie many techniques professional use for gaining compliance. So these are the in the coming slides we can see 6 basic principles for gaining compliance. First one is friendship or liking. We know that we are more willing to comply with the request from friends or from people we like than with requests from strangers or people we do not know before or we do not like. Next is commitment or consistency. Once we commit ourselves to a position or an action, we are more willing to say or do things that fit the committed position in various ways. We need to have consistency of our behavior. Next comes the principle of scarcity. It is a tendency to value, to feel worthy about, and to secure opportunities that are scarce or decreasing day by day. Next comes the principle of reciprocity. We are generally more willing to comply with a request from someone who has previously provided a favor or concession to us than to someone who has not. So we are responding to a previous favor given by other person. Next is social validation. It is a tendency to comply with a request for some action if this action is consistent with what we believe person similar to ourselves are doing or thinking. We want to be correct, and one way to do so is to act and think like other people. Next is credibility. If the source is an expert with knowledge, abilities or skills, that is more credible. We would respect the request more and we would be more likely to comply in that situation. Next comes different tactics the professionals use for gaining compliance. So let's see what are the tactics based on the first principle of friendship or liking. First one is ingratiation, that is getting others to like us so that they will be more willing to agree to our request. Among this, we can see two types of tactics: self-enhancing tactics and other enhancing tactics. These things we can see in the area of impression management. So self-enhancing tactics, it includes giving smiles, high level of eye contact, etc. So we are improving one's appearance, emitting positive nonverbal cues, and associating oneself with positive events or people the target person already likes. The other enhancement techniques include flattery, agreeing with the target persons with their viewpoints, showing interest in them and providing them with small gifts or favors. Next is the tactics based on the principles of commitment or consistency. First one is foot in the door technique. It is a procedure for gaining compliance in which the requester begins with a smaller request first, and when this is granted, we escalate to a larger one, which was the actual target of the person. So we can see people borrowing money from others. First they will ask for a small amount. If that thing is accepted, they will ask for higher amount. And another technique is low ball procedure. This involves offering an attractive deal to the customer first, and after they accept, we will change that offer in some way which may not be that much appealing for the client, but they will accept it because of the consistency tactic. The consistency principle that exists among individuals. Next is bait and switch tactic. It is a technique for gaining compliance in which once the customer enters the shop, the items offered for the sale are shown as unavailable or presented of very low quality. Next comes the techniques based on reciprocity principle. First one is door in the face. Last one was foot in the door. So don't make it confused. So door in the face. Here it is a procedure for gaining compliance in which the requester first begin with the larger request, and when this is refused, retreat to a smaller request. So it is just opposite to foot in the door technique. we'll ask for higher amount, and if it is not approved, we'll ask for lesser amount. Next is foot in the mouth technique. When people feel that they are in a relationship with another person, no matter how trivial or unimportant, they often feel that they are obliged to help or considerate to that person simply because the relationship exists. Next is that is not all technique. An initial request is followed before the target person can make up his or her mind to say yes or no. A small incentive is offered by the person who is using this tactic that sweetens the deal, and the request will be accepted by the target person or the consumer. Next comes the tactics based on scarcity principle. There are two tactics. One, playing hard to get. This technique involves effort to increase the compliance by suggesting that a person or object is scarce, rare, and hard to obtain. Next is deadline technique. This is a technique for increasing compliance in which the target person are told that they have only limited time to take the advantage of some offer or to obtain some item. You can see these kind of techniques used in NAPTOL sales. Next comes other tactics for gaining compliance. First one is complaining. In the context of complaints, expressing discontent, dissatisfaction, resentment or regret as a means of exerting social influence on others. So complaining involves expression of discontent or dissatisfaction with oneself or some aspect of the external world, and often such statements are simple expressions of personal states. This can be seen among couples. Then comes putting others in good mood. People's mood often exert a strong effort on their behavior. And it seems this principle also holds with respect to compliance. When individuals are in good mood, they tend to be more willing to say yes to various requests than when they are in a neutral, negative mood. So we'll put others in a good mood. We use the term soaping for this. Next, the third area of social influence, that is obedience. So we covered first area, that is conformity. The second area was compliance, and the third area is obedience. So obedience is a form of social influence where an individual acts in response to a direct order from another individual who is usually an authority figure. So the term which we should stress here is order. We are responding to direct order from another individual who is an authority figure. So obedience occurs when you are told to do something by the authority, whereas the conformity happens through social pressure, and obedience involves a hierarchy of power or status. But we can see that obedience is less frequent than conformity or compliance nowadays, because even persons who possess authority and power generally prefer to exert it through the velvet glove, through request rather than direct orders. And from some forms of human obedience. Obedience to laws, obedience to social norms, obedience to a monarch, government, organization, religion or church, obedience to God, obedience to self-imposed constraints, obedience to a spouse or child, to a husband or wife or parent respectively, obedience to management in the workplace. Now, cultural attitude to obedience. Obedience is regarded as a virtue in many traditional cultures. Historically, children have been expected to be obedient to their elders, slaves to their owners, serfs to their lords in feudal society, and the lords to their king, and everyone to God. And obedience training of human beings. Learning to obey adult rules is a major part of the socialization process that exists in our society in childhood, and many techniques are used by adults to modify the behavior of children. Now comes the experimental studies of human obedience. There are three major studies or experiments. First one was Milgram Experiment, then Stanford Prison Experiment, and the latest one was Hoffling Hospital Experiment. First one, Milgram's Experiment. It was carried out in 1961. It was the earliest investigation of the power of authority figures as well as the lengths to which the participants would go as a result of their influence. The Milgram's result showed that the contradictory to expectations, a majority of civilian volunteers would obey orders to apply electric shock to another person until they were unconscious or dead. The experiment proves that obedience is something humans teach one another and follow through with. Milgram thinks that the problem lies in the structure of society. People are just following orders of superiors and are not directly responsible for his or her actions. Next comes the 1971 Stanford Prison Experiment. Here, the experiment studied the behavior of people in groups, and in particular, the willingness of people to obey orders and adopt abusive roles in a situation where they were placed in the position of being submissive or dominant by a higher authority. In the experiment, actually, a group of volunteers were divided into two groups and placed in a prison, with one group in the position of playing prison guards and the other group in the position of prisoners. The prisoners from that state adopted a submissive role with regard to their tormentors, even though they knew that they were in an experiment and that the captors were other volunteers with no actual authority other than that being role played in the experiment. The experiment demonstrated not only obedience of the guards to the experimenters and the prisoners to both guards and experimenters, but also high levels of compliance and conformity. The last experiment was Hoffling's Hospital Experiment. It was done in 1966 by psychiatrist Charles K. Hoffling. He published the results of a field experiment on obedience in the nurse-physician relationship in its natural hospital settings. The nurses, unaware that they were taking part in an experiment, were ordered by unknown doctors to administer dangerous doses of a fictional drug to the patients. Although several hospital rules disallowed administering the drugs under the circumstances, 21 out of the 22 nurses would have given the patient an overdose of medicine. This all shows the kind of destructive obedience that exists in our society due to the earlier socialization process happened in childhood. Then factors that increase obedience. In Milgram's study, the commands were given by an authority figure rather than another volunteer, and the experiments were done in a prestigious institution. The authority figure were present in the group with the subject to give confidence for them, and the learner was in another group, and the subject did not see other subjects disobeying the commands. Then the factors to carry out obedience to extremes. People always justify their behavior by assigning responsibility to other authority rather than themselves. They think that it is the authority who is responsible and not myself. People define the behavior that is expected of them as routine. People don't want to be rude or offend the authority. People obey easy commands first and then feel compelled to obey more and more difficult commands. This process is called entrapment, and it illustrates the foot in the door phenomenon. Only when we can differentiate between being a good subject and having good morals will we be able to make a distinction between being obedient and committing crimes to our own individual actions. So here comes the end of the session. Thank you.